I'm a bit older, but at least I don't know whether that is at all, but I probably could have taken it.
And I felt
I
too
know.
bad.
I have two adult ones like
So it's
that.
really kind of cool to see where Bill's
They all-
turning over now and learning about the different
Like that,
options.
but-
I'm not sure obviously they have
You need to look in the mirror.
I don't really mind seeing Santa coming out. We did a little bit of visits, you know, we did some college visits, on some UCs, UCLA, UC, you know, and they really enjoyed UC Sacramento.
Yes, it's been a while, yeah.
Good afternoon. I am so happy to see so many of you already arriving, having already arrived. There are some delays with others who are on their way. But I also know that many of you have other things that follow this, so I'm going to do the best I can to engage us and allow the other candidates certainly to arrive. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Pastor Joy Johnson. I am the past president of the board for Sacramento Area Congregations Together. And currently, I'm the president of PICO, California. PICO, California is the parent organization, I guess you would say, but we network 11 other organizations like Sacramento Act throughout the state of California. Our major focus is improving the lives of families across this whole state through the work of our networks, Sacramento Area Congregations being one of those. I'm also the chief architect of Dr. Joy Johnson Ministries, an LLC here in Sacramento. I am the founder and director of Sacramento Black Clergy Fellowship. In that fellowship, I lead Black leaders, Black faith leaders, to imagine the Black church and to intentionally meet our community where they are. I was just sharing with one of the candidates up here, we are right now working and holding healing circles in the Del Paso Heights area, and we believe it's having a profound impact on reducing crime in that area. I want to thank you, all of you, for being here and showing your support for this very critical electoral process. Today, we will be addressing candidates running for Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, California State Assembly, and California State Senate, all vitally important. It is a blessing. It is a blessing to see so many community members who are interested in exercising your rights and your responsibility. I'd like to emphasize responsibility because this is a part of our true democracy. I also know and would like to acknowledge there are several who are joining, almost as many, equally as many, joining us virtually through live stream. And so I acknowledge them as well. We are here, we are all here because we love our community and we feel a sense of responsibility and commitment. By being here today, we are representing the many voices who often go unheard. Some are the voices of the young, my grandchildren and your grandchildren. Some are the voices who are not eligible to vote, those who are incarcerated or recently returnees. Others are simply carrying too heavy a load of poverty and houselessness to be able to cast a vote, to care to cast a vote. And so your vote matters extremely. And I want to thank you for your faithful service, those here and those online. I want to thank you for your faithful service and your commitment, not only for yourself, but to all those we've just named. I'd like to take a moment now and offer you some rules, some expectations for this gathering. I pray that we will be able to conduct this forum with respect and civility. Respect and civility. So let me explain a few of the ground rules. First, this forum will not be open to take questions from the audience. Will not. Second, we have a very full agenda of pre-approved questions that are based on the topics and issues that you, the participants, registered when you registered for today's event. Thirdly, I will recognize each speaker at designated times, and only the people on the agenda will offer comment. Fourthly, we have a timekeeper to light the, okay. Hazel is our timekeeper today, and Hazel will hold up signs to notify the speakers that their time is winding up, and she will raise a very stern sign when time has exhausted, so that we might stay on time with our responses. Lastly, and most important to me, I am a keeper of sacred and safe spaces. I am a keeper of sacred and safe spaces. If you are of a mind of being in a sacred and safe space, if you are of a mind of having a meaningful engagement, a meaningful forum, I ask that you help me to hold this space in safety and sacredness for 90 minutes. I thank you for helping me to accomplish that. A few thoughts or statements to the candidates. We want to thank all of you. I see Stephanie's in the back. Hi, yeah, but we've got a couple of Eric and Jaclyn here in the front. There are others on their way. They're journeying here. We want to thank all of you and those that are on their way for giving your time today. These candidates have received the questions ahead of time, and I will be asking each pair of candidates for each office the same questions in turn, so that you, the participants, can hear their responses on each topic. Each candidate has been asked to keep it to 3 minutes, keep the responses to 3 minutes or less. And we're going to start in this order. We're going to start with candidates for State Assembly District 10, followed by the candidates for Sacramento County Supervisor District 5, and lastly, the candidates for State Senate 8. This order was partially based on the candidates' availability. Let me also share that although County Supervisor candidate Pat Hume was invited to join us today, he will not be participating. His opponent, Jaclyn Moreno, will answer the questions that we prepared for the County Supervisor office. And finally, we should note that all questions were sent to the candidates, I said that a moment ago, in advance, and they have had time to prepare their answers. So, let's get started. If you have not silenced your phone, please do so. Please do so now. And I would also encourage you to move a little bit forward. I know we have to distance. We can't sit on top of one another because we are still in a pandemic. But if we could, we would like to have you a little closer in. The first 5 rows are ideal, but certainly you can spread out across the auditorium. And I think that gives our candidates a real opportunity to speak to you. So I'm going to shift and move over here to have a seat so I don't have to stand the whole time. So while you're moving, I'm moving. Let's move together. I would like to also acknowledge our sponsors for today's forum, Sacramento Area Congregations Together. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about Sacramento Area Congregations Together. It was founded in 1991. It's a nonprofit, multi-ethnic, multi-faith grassroots community organization that seeks to organize communities to improve the quality of life for Sacramento families. Sacramento Act represents over 40 congregations and 60,000 families in our region. Sacramento Act is a part of the PICO California Network. And as I mentioned, I am now the president of that board. Our second sponsor today is the National Council of Jewish Women. It's a grassroots organization of volunteers who turn progressive ideals into actions. It's inspired by Jewish values. The National Council of Jewish Women strives for social justice by improving the quality of life for women, children, and families, and by safeguarding individual rights and freedoms. The missions of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Sacramento is to educate and advocate on issues of vital importance to the Jewish community based on core American values and a living commitment to Jewish ethics and social justice. Can we just give a hand of applause for Sacramento Act and the National Council of Jewish Women? Thank you so much for your service as well. And have we heard from Angelique yet? No? We're going to go forward then, and I'm going to ask Eric Guerra, who is running for State Assembly District 10, very dear friend. Would you come to the podium, please? And we'll get started. I'm sitting because I'm as much a participant as a moderator. So as a moderator, I'm going to ask the candidates the questions, and I ask that all of you really lean in and listen carefully to the responses. First of all, Eric, it's a question around help and justice accountability. Currently, public agencies throughout the state, like counties and school districts, are finding it very difficult to hire social, mental, behavior health, and public health workers. The most recent state budget included billions B, to help address this problem. Considering the state just passed Care Court and juvenile justice realignment, making these health workers even more essential, how should the state hold counties accountable for spending these funds in an equitable way? And is pay equity for health workers part of the plan?
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Joy. I don't know if this thing is on. 1, 2. 1, 2. Well, we'll assume that it's on here. Very good. Well, thank you very much. First, let me thank PICO California for their great work. I've had the pleasure of working with PICO California for almost 20 years, fighting for the rights of those in need, for the rights for immigrants, the rights to access to health care. I know that personally, having grown up as a migrant farm worker, and I appreciate their work today. Number one, let me answer the second question. Is pay equity for healthcare workers part of the plan, or should be part of the plan? And the easy answer for that is yes. But number two, the accountability, and how do you actually execute this program? This is where I think I differ as a candidate, having been on the board of trustees for the Cal State University system, and also seen the entire educational system from community college, UC and CSU. We need to increase the capacity of our healthcare workers. We need to make sure that we're making, just like we are here today at Consumnes River College, that we're making a clear pathway to have more workers in this area. But just like the many of the students and classmates of mine that went through the Masters of Social Work at Sac State, they are underpaid. We're competing against their needs versus other parts of the healthcare industry. So yes, we need to increase the access to healthcare workers. Before we even ask the question, how do we hold the counties accountable? How would we hold the counties accountable as a state assembly member? Well, number one, I would use my experience working with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee and the state auditor. As an assembly member, I would put in a request to the state Joint Legislative Audit Committee and encourage the Senate and the Assembly to approve an oversight plan as Care Courts moves forward on how we're making sure that equity and justice is part of the delivery model, and then making sure that we're also looking at making that all segments are involved in hiring our workers. Lastly, I would also say that we're not going to have a true system if we think that the 58 counties are going to do it alone. I want to make sure that our counties have legally binding agreements with their neighboring jurisdictions, cities as well, Because just like building a house, it doesn't just take a hammer. It takes multiple tools to build a house, which means to solve the issue of health and justice and homelessness and all of the issues that are combined in addressing mental health and substance abuse, it's going to take all of the pieces together. And if we continue this finger pointing of cities and counties in the state, then it's not going to happen. The last thing I will say is that for 3 decades or 4 decades, the state has relinquished its responsibility to the counties and cities to respond to this issue. It's time that the state take ownership of the problem and make sure that that it funds and create and is part of the solution. When we closed the mental health hospitals and didn't create regional centers, we were set for failure. And thank you for your time in that question.
All right, thank you very much for that response. Our next question has to do with housing and homelessness, which many of us have been working on diligently in this city. And the question reads this way: our current system leads to very different access to supportive services for different people in crisis based on somewhat arbitrary factors. Are you in favor of growing social supports like permanent supportive housing for people who don't meet the legal definition for incompetence, but who are unable to properly care for themselves? And second part of that question, the B part, is how would you remove the barriers and increase resources from where would you get those? So it's a C, from where would you get those resources?
Well, thank you very much. Well, first, let me just say I'm proud to have worked with many of our community partners to address the issue of people experiencing homelessness. Proud to have worked with St. John's Center for Real Change since the day I got elected to be able to provide an expansion of space for families who are experiencing homelessness with wraparound services, and then was able to push the first home key application in our county to be able to create St. John's Square. That is 55 units of manufactured homes where families can live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home with a kitchen and a living room, real housing, and creating a sense of community that has now led multiple cohorts into independence and self-sufficiency. The other thing I'm proud of to be partnering on is with Mercy Housing, where we've built workforce housing, and they are the example of also creating permanent supportive housing. If we think about permanent supportive housing, many of our seniors would benefit from permanent supportive housing. Many of also our workers with disabilities would benefit from permanent supportive housing, and even our veterans who have suffered as well and don't meet that level. Yes, I would support that. And number one, in years in the past where we've seen these budget surpluses, I would have used that funding to make sure that we deal with the gap financing to be able to meet the need for permanent supportive housing. Second, just like I've done on Stockton Boulevard, I would look at ministerial approval processes, reducing the permit requirement, and looking at the fee structure for the construction of permanent supportive housing so that we can actually build them. See, before even a door is put up in a permanent supportive housing center, the cost of water, sewer, stormwater runoff, utilities, electricity is so expensive that it blows up the cost to have the space and capacity for the workforce training, for the mental health and substance abuse programs to do that. The resources we could do it, first of all, I would like to take another look at the Mental Health Services Act and see if the planning process is serving us well to making sure that we're using those funds correctly. And even right now, our counties, with so many allocations of funding, the restrictions on every pot of money, and the inability for counties to be able to pull these funds because of the bureaucracy has left sometimes money on the table because they can't do it together. As an assembly member with my years of experience both at the county, the city, and the state level, and working directly now on the 4x2 city-county partnership, I would look at untangling the mess that has tied up much of our dollars to make sure that we're making the best use of our dollars. Finally, we need to stop being reactionary and start thinking of planning for the future. 30 years from now, if somebody would have thought about that when the state moved the mental health services down to the counties, before they closed the state hospitals, before they moved all of the acute patients in the psychiatric centers at the state correctional facilities to the county jails where there is no facilities, if they would have thought about 30 years, we probably wouldn't be in this mess right now. So that's why I would be taking not only what we need now, but what we can do for the future. Thank you very much for that time.
I must apologize. Stephanie, I was supposed to bring you down at the same time. humble apology. Will you come and join us now here in the front? Okay, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
All right, that's all right with you. Okay, so let's go to, I'm so sorry. Let's go to the last question I have for you, Eric, and it's regarding climate. How do we increase affordable housing stock while still being proactive on reducing greenhouse gases through establishing enforceable legislation at the state level? The B part of that is how can the state legislature ensure city and county governments will be held accountable?
Very good. Thank you. Well, first, I'm going to start with the second one. I would work with our Attorney General, Rob Bonta, to make sure that the state holds cities accountable for the regional housing allocation and legally go after those cities that have not built the housing needs that has caused pressure here in Sacramento and Elk Grove. So many folks that have been priced out of the Bay Area have come here because the Bay Area did not meet its responsibility. And it's important that the state take legal action and legislative action to make sure that that happens. Second, I would say that I would use the budget process to look at the money, the power of the purse, to be able to say, if you're not meeting your regional housing allocation lead, then you don't get your state funding allocation as well. And I would work with my colleagues to figure out a fair and balanced way so that every city is playing and meeting their regional housing needs. Now, let me go back to the points of how do we actually build affordable housing that is also environmentally prudent. One, our commercial corridors are great places right now, like Stockton Boulevard, Franklin, Mack Road, where we have vacant lot, vacant land, but yet they are better transit line systems. Improving the transit line system and housing around our transit line is going to do co-equal goals. One, making our transit lines more reliable and also reducing the reliance on vehicles for families that need housing. If you think about the cost of a car, insurance, gas, maintenance, all of those pieces add up. If we can build housing on transit lines, such as like the 51, that's the most effective line in the RT system, we'll improve that. Second, it's design, and I'll take a play out of my little sister's playbook. She's a project manager for Mutual Housing California, and I was proud to see her design of farm worker housing in Woodland, where the not only was it affordable housing, but it was designed in net zero energy, where they got a bill for $5 because that's what it costs to send the bill to them, not because of the use of the electricity, but the design of the electricity. I would also want to be on the budget subcommittee on education and finance so that we can support our CSU and UC systems to make sure that they are looking at designing and creating ideas so that they can help us find better energy efficiency with our housing stock. Again, if we look at what other countries have done who don't have access and resources to utilities, they've looked at ways to be more efficient with the use of electricity, the use of solar and wind. We can learn outside of out of our region here by making sure that we make those decisions. But I'll go back to the accountability again. We have to hold every jurisdiction accountable. If not, we're never going to build our way out of the problem. Infill designs, making sure it's smart, and using real data to solve these problems. As an engineer, I'm proud to use that methodology to be able to solve those issues. Having grown up and lived in subpar housing, it's important that we look at all of those keys, not just for making sure the housing is there, but it's quality and affordable.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. I appreciate that, Eric. And I apologize because we said we're going to bring both candidates at the same time. At this point, I would like to bring up Stephanie Nguyen, who is also running for State Assembly District 10. State Assembly District 10. And we will lead you through the same questions. Yes, yes.
I apologize for the casual dressing. I've been out in the field since 8 o'clock this morning, and I've got my 2 kids with me here, and they've been out since 8 o'clock this morning too. So I'm going to apologize in advance if they act out, especially the little one. So she's a little special. So in case she runs up and does anything, I just want to apologize in advance. But she's very affectionate, so she may just give you hugs and kisses just for no reason at all. She
that's
tends to do that
great.
quite often, so I apologize in advance if that happens.
That's so great. That's so great. We are safe and sacred in here, so that's great. And again, I thank you for allowing us to make a shift a little bit. I'm going to ask you the same questions, and I also ask those online as well as those in the audience here, give close attention to these responses. So back to the health and justice accountability. Currently, Stephanie, public agencies throughout the state, like counties and school districts, are finding it very difficult to hire social, mental, behavioral health, and public health workers. The most recent state budget included billions to help address the problem. Considering the state just passed care court and juvenile justice realignment, making these health workers even more essential, how should the state hold counties accountable for spending these funds in an equitable way? And is pay equity for health workers part of the plan?
Great, thank you. And I too want to just say thank you, Pastor Joy, for being the moderator for today, but also for all of you for taking your Sunday afternoon and being here, and to the candidates as well. It's tough. We've got, 31 days left, and yet we're out there hitting the roads. And these candidate forums are very important because it gives folks an opportunity to hear from us in person. But it also takes time out of our day and our families as well, too. So I appreciate everybody that runs for office, because it gives us as voters options to be able to see what aligns and doesn't align with us. So back to the question. I run a nonprofit organization. I'm an executive director of a nonprofit organization that provides social services programs to our community. Let that sit for just half a second. Social services programs for our community. The organization has been around for over 40 years. It started during the fall of Saigon when Vietnamese war refugees came here with absolutely nothing, and we didn't know what to do with them. And as a daughter of refugees, my family was a part of that. And so community activists got together and started this organization. I promise you it's important for me to say all this because now I get to run that organization as the executive director. Now it's me providing these social services programs to the community that needs it the most, the working families, the low income, limited English speaking, refugees, undocumented, folks with barriers, those that have been recently incarcerated. They are in dire need of these social services programs so that they can be self-sufficient, so that they can be contributors to this community. And I can tell you this, that it is hard work. While it's a nonprofit organization providing social services to the community, we are social workers. We sit at our desk making phone calls, talking with community members every single day, finding out how we can help them put food on the table for their families, finding out how we can help them make ends meet every single day while they're struggling right now, right? And so when I take a look at those social workers that work for the city and the counties and the state, and if I'm struggling as a nonprofit organization, I know they are struggling. And I know that they go home with that on their backs every night. And then you've got to go home and be a mother or a father and care for your families as well too. And then you've got to go home and figure out how to fix your life if you've got issues going on. They have been severely underpaid. And the Great Recession did no good to us because the budget was cut even more. Thankfully, this year's budget included big investment, but it still wasn't enough. As your assembly member, I would absolutely advocate for more funding to go to these programs because I'm a product that grew up on public assistance my entire life. My time is up, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And then the second question is around housing and homelessness. Question reads, our current system leads to very different access to supportive services for different people in crisis based on somewhat arbitrary factors. Are you in favor of growing social supports like permanent supportive housing for people who don't meet the legal definition for incompetence, but who are unable to properly care for themselves? How would you remove barriers and increase resources? And then thirdly, from where would the resources come?
So I'll take that last one first, because I'd say it'd come from the state, right? If you couldn't tell earlier, I have so much passion for social services and programs in our community. And I believe that the state needs to invest into more social services, and especially into permanent supportive housing. I worked with Assembly Member Jim Cooper 2 years ago on bringing $5 million to the city of Elk Grove. $5 million. And that is now why we have a dedicated homeless navigator and a crisis manager and programs and support so that we keep people off the streets and into housing and receive services. And I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna get a little emotional because my daughter is here. My 7-year-old daughter is here. And she is special needs. And it's taken me 7 years to talk about it, because it's time that families that have children, adults with special needs come out and talk about it. In my community, we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not. My daughter's 7 years old, but she has the mindset of a 3-year-old. And she may stay that way for the rest of her life. And when I'm gone, who is going to take care of her? She's going to need exactly what we're talking about right now. So yes, I'm going to advocate for it, because I have to live with this every single day, and I want my daughter to have a chance, have a life. So I'm not just saying it just to say it because I'm running for office. I'm saying it because I live it every single day. Every day. And it worries me every day that there isn't a support system for her when I'm gone. So yes, I will advocate for it. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question is under the topic of climate. How do we increase affordable housing stock while still being proactive on reducing greenhouse gases through establishing enforceable legislation at the state level? And how can the state legislature ensure city and county governments will be held accountable for that?
Climate change is real. I talk about my kids, and I want them to still be around when I'm gone, when we're all gone, and their grandkids to be around as well too. And so we absolutely must do something about it. But as somebody who grew up all her life, right, until her adulthood, and I was able to purchase a home in low-income housing, I can tell you that some of the changes we're making at the state level is making it really hard for working families, low-income families, to be able to make ends meet. Right, I take a look at the rebates that are happening for gas, electrical cars, and if you take a look at who are driving these Teslas, it's not community members that are from low-income communities, right? They're coastal folks from affluent neighborhoods. And so when you're talking about rebates and things that are going to make it easier for everybody to be able to afford all of these electrical devices and the changes that we're making, we also need to think about these families that can't afford it and look at how do we make it so that these families can afford it. The shortage is real. Absolutely it is. But I would also say that many of the housing proposals get stuck in the CEQA litigation. And that if we're going to move more affordable housing, then we need to take a look at how do we move that a lot faster? And where can we move it to so that families have an opportunity, have a chance to be able to get off the street and afford it? Right now, a lot of our laws and our climate change laws are pricing people out of even being homeowners. So for me right now, while I understand and I know climate change is real, we need to do more. We absolutely need to do more. We also need to make sure that people are not living in streets. Because I have to tell you this, every single day when I go to work, somebody has to make a decision on whether or not they feed their family, put gas in their car, or pay the rent so that they can stay in their house, and that's not fair, right? If you have to choose between those three, that's not fair. So let's take a look at some of these programs that we have for communities and working families and try to get them access to this. Because yes, Friday, I helped somebody apply for social services programs. And they were $5 short from being able to afford that. $5. Can you believe that? $5. She didn't qualify for CalFresh because of that. So she has to choose whether she could feed her family, put gas in the car and go to work. Should she even go to work? Because where she's working at right now doesn't afford her the ability to feed her family, put gas in the car, go to work, and pay her rent. That shouldn't sit well with anybody at all. Anybody. I think my time is up. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Come on, let's give a round of applause for both of these candidates. Our city would be better with either one of these candidates. I'm so glad they're running. I'd like to move forward now to our discussion. We only have one. Pat Hume, as I mentioned, is not here, but for the county supervisor candidate, Jaclyn Moreno. Welcome, Jaclyn. Don't want to shorten your name here. So glad you're here. So glad you're here. And I have a set of questions that I know you've had a chance to review, and we'd like to hear your responses. The first question has to deal with youth. The city has done a lot of work to support youth. How will the county engage the public and offer community-based organizations and youth groups within Sacramento County to develop a youth policy agenda around behavioral health and wellness and supportive housing options to prevent incarceration?
First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. When I saw these questions, I did a little happy dance because this is my jam. I have been doing this work for over 22 years as a school psychologist in the community on the ground floor every single day, trying to make sure that health and wellness is a reality for all students in the community. I've worked with kids from preschool age all the way up to college age, and I'm so thankful and thrilled that you've asked this question. I've been to a few forums, and I have to say that this is the first question asked about youth in our community. And so it's so important that we get the chance to hear about what policies that we can put in place to address the challenges that our youth are having. I know that 1 out of every 5 high school kids, 1 out of every 5, that's 200 in a high school of 1,000 kids, contemplate suicide every year. That number has only grown since the pandemic. We are not in a good space. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a 7th grader in Elk Grove Unified commit suicide. I was part of the response team that helped with that situation. We need an intense focus on youth, and I'm so proud to talk about that, what I would do here today. Number 1, I think investing in community schools is one of the most important investments that we could make at the county level. Community schools, for all of you that don't know, are public schools that provide services and support that fit each neighborhood's needs. It's an integrative approach that encompasses a lot of different things, including before and after school programs beyond the traditional enrichment opportunities, learning opportunities for family and community members, and then also health and wellness support right on our campuses. Another feature of community schools is trauma-informed care. We know extensive research supports that we have a harmful, I'm sorry to stop. Do I have a time limit as well? In my email, it said I did not have a time limit because I do not have an opponent. So I just want to make sure before I move forward.
3 minutes still.
I do have only 3 minutes. Oh no, okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, let me keep going then. Community schools can also include trauma-informed care, which is really, really important. Imagine the possibilities. Think of it this way. Depending on the needs of a community, imagine a school open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. where students and families can access academic support, social emotional support, access to social workers, legal advice, food, clothing, job training, healthcare, including mental health care.
And the good news, the state of California has already funded pilots for this. In fact, we have several pilot programs going right now within the county of Sacramento. And as supervisor, I would work to build on these successes and bring more community schools to our neighborhoods. We need more investment into identifying mental health challenges early on. The investment into peer-to-peer support programs is essential and also really inexpensive. We can train peers to be mental health ambassadors on their campuses and in their communities. And there's a ton of research showing the effectiveness of these programs. The county should work with schools to invest in simple solutions to early identification. The county should invest in screening all students, all youth, for mental health challenges, and then use those screenings to be able to identify patterns within the communities and be able to respond to those patterns. And I am going to stop here, although I have much more to say on that if you want to hear it.
We will move to question 2.
Sure.
And that one addresses homelessness. It reads, if elected, what would be your specific priorities for addressing homelessness? B, how would you change the narrative about unhoused residents, if at all? And C, are any of the following, and there's a long list of solutions, and I won't read those to eat up more of your time. How would your solutions be funded? So if you could talk
Yes,
about your solutions
absolutely.
and how they might be.
So the county is spending a lot of money on homelessness with essentially no results, right? And I think it's important that an internal audit be conducted so we know how that money is spent and where we could better utilize that funding. How amazing would it be to have a mental health professional on that board that could help guide the exact use of that funding? I think that there needs to be more stakeholders at the table in the regional meetings that are currently happening within the city of Sacramento, the county of Sacramento, and business stakeholders. We need to have more voices at the table. I would advocate for a regional plan to be created complete with goals and objectives so that we could keep ourselves accountable for those outcomes and so that we could better use the funding that we have on reaching those goals and objectives. I think the plan needs to be public because I think the public needs to help keep us accountable in making sure we're reaching those goals. I would advocate for an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which would allow for the building of affordable homes in all new developments. We have 68,000 single-family homes already approved in this region on green space. And I think it's time that we advocate for mixed-use development, transit-oriented development, and infill development so that we have a variety of affordable homes for people with varying incomes. And then I support growing the collaborative and specialized courts that we have within the county, which are a partnership with public defenders, DAs, probation. When someone enters one of these collaborative courts, it provides for an increase in coordinated care. And we've seen a lot of success with these current programs. There's a pilot program going on right now, and the data is extremely encouraging. As supervisor, I would advocate for increasing the funding going to these preventative programs that are proven to reduce recidivism. And that's all I have.
All right. Great, and we will move then from homelessness to health workforce. There's a question that the participants submitted reading this way. Currently, counties throughout the state are finding it difficult to hire social mental health workers and public health workers, sort of the question we asked the other candidates. There is a severe pay equity issue that is contributing to the deficit of available trained workers. What should Sacramento County do to address our social mental health and public health worker gap? B, would you support bringing their pay to a level comparable to other county jobs? And C, does your plan change budget priorities? And if so, how are those priorities changed?
So currently, I'm a part of an ad hoc mental health community that works to push the county on these types of issues involved with mental health care. I haven't been as involved as I would like to be since running for office. That tends to take a lot of time, but I do know a few things about this as well. First of all, it's absolutely essential that we make our county workers, our mental health workers, pay commensurate with other jobs that currently exist in our region. We're losing a lot of good people with institutional knowledge because they're going to other places, frankly, that pay more money and have better benefits. Secondly, I don't know if you know this, but the state created a new position called a behavioral health coach. It's brand new in 2021, and with a specialized associate's degree, this new position will exist to fill a lot of gaps that we are seeing in our community in regards to screening and care coordination. This new position is sorely needed because it cuts years of training to become a psychologist or a social worker. I had to do 8 years of training to become a school psychologist. We need to lean into this and start recruiting and hiring for this position for the county. Thirdly, I strongly support using an apprenticeship program where people can earn a wage while they're training for mental health professions. We use this approach in the trades frequently, but it's a relatively new concept for mental health care. I think it's amazing the work that's already been done right here. We have some transformational work being done in this space between SCOE, the county, Los Rios, and CSUS. They've already started working on this. We now have funding to start with entry-level mental health workers, and this will upscale over time to include mid-level and master's level workers, apprenticeships to get paid while you're actually training. That's phenomenal. I didn't have that opportunity, and it was really, really tough. These workers that we currently have funding for will be community-based, but there's also a movement to include school-based workers as well within that. And I would definitely support this as supervisor. Lastly, we need to be coordinating with high schools to offer pathways for mental health professions. I have a 15-year-old who's a sophomore in high school who wants to be a therapist. And there is no pathway that exists in her high school for her to explore that avenue even further to see if it's something that they want to pursue. Currently, we're creating this opportunity right here in this region for 2 schools. 2 schools are going to have mental health pathways, but that's not enough. We need to advocate for more, and we need to make sure that more jump on board so that kids can see themselves in this profession and see the good work that they can do in the community.
Thank you. Last question to you. It deals with climate. Our participants ask this: the climate action plan has been described as vague and lacking in accountability. 3 specific deficits are: 1, it lacks specific and enforceable performance standards, timelines, and program details. 2, it lacks a thorough economic analysis of outcomes based on choices which must be made to put the plan into action. And 3, it lacks dedicated funding. Will you commit to improving the climate action plan? And do you agree on the need to increase specificity and accountability in the plan?
So this is an important question to me. I absolutely will commit to working on improving the climate action plan at the county. I've talked a little bit about my kids. My oldest is 15. They're just starting to get a little bit better sense of who they are politically and what their political identity is. I had this great conversation with them a few weeks back, and I was pretty impressed by how much they knew about politics. But I asked them, what's the number 1 issue to you? Do you want to know what their response was? Climate. And climate action. We owe this to our young people. We owe this to future generations to make a dent in this issue before they have to deal with it. And so I'm absolutely committed to bring this back. I'm proud of the work that I've done at the Casumna CSD. I was elected in 2018. And when I was elected, I immediately started working with stakeholders on the development of our own climate action plan. This is amazing because the state of California does not require special districts to have climate action plans. But as someone who wants our government to be accountable and believes that the government needs to do more, I sat there and fought and championed this for Casumna CSD. And we now have a climate action plan in place, the first of any special district in our state. I know that the board Supervisors was going to take a vote on this climate action plan last week. They decided not to. They decided to delay the vote, which I'm incredibly glad they did. I think it needs a lot more work. The current plan that will be voted on has several issues that I think you specified within the question. But first, the county's cap currently as written allows for the circumventing of the environmental review for new projects, which could actually increase the carbon emissions in our region and create a lot of challenges for us to receive future funding. Second, the current cap does not have language in place to reduce urban sprawl, which would end up contributing to our climate crisis. We know that in order to solve our climate crisis, we have to look at recreating a development plan that includes more infill and more transit-oriented development, because that in turn will be less vehicles on the road. Like I said before, we currently have 68,000 single-family homes already approved for development in Sacramento County. Time to shift our focus to infill. Time to shift our focus to mixed-use development. We need a climate action plan with implementation, goals, and objectives that we can all work to be accountable for. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. We need more accountability in government, not less. We need people to keep us accountable, but we also need to keep ourselves accountable. And I'm happy to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, candidate. Thank you so much, Candidate Moreno. We really appreciate that. And we will move forward now to look at the Senate District 8 candidates. First, Angelique Ashby, and secondly, David Jones. I'd like to ask both of you if you could join us at the front. And we have a few questions from our participants that we're going to be posing to you. So I'm glad to see you all on today. We have already established that Sunday is a hard day to be to get out for one of these forums, but I appreciate the diligence with which you all have seen fit to participate. I do. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Yes. Okay. And shall we give them let's welcome them. Yes. We do know that it's difficult. The questions that we have today have been submitted to you prior to today. You will each have 3 minutes to respond. I'm going to read the questions. The first question has to do with the topic of health and justice accountability. I'd like to start with you, Candidate Jones. Currently, public agencies throughout the state, like counties and school districts, are finding it very difficult to hire social, mental, behavioral health, and public health workers. The most recent state budget included billions to help address this problem. Considering the state just passed care court and juvenile justice realignment, making these health workers even more essential, how should the state hold counties accountable to spending these funds in an equitable way? And the B part is pay equity for health workers part of that plan? I'm going to ask you to respond first, and then we'll ask Candidate Ashby.
Thanks. Well, first, let me begin by thanking Area Congregations Together and JCRC and NCJW for hosting this forum and for all of your advocacy and leadership. So the budget did include substantial funding for behavioral health specialists in the school context, as well as standing up a training and recruitment program through what used to be called Ashby and now is called the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. The principal way, though, in which counties will be funding behavioral health is through Medi-Cal. And I think it's absolutely essential that we use community-based organizations as a way of making sure that we have an equitable, diverse, and just deployment of behavioral health specialists, both clinical and non-clinical. Let me give you an example. FEMA provided the state of California with an emergency grant in the wake of COVID to enable the California Mental Health Services Authority to actually go out and select some 15 or so community-based organizations that serve different diverse communities and different geographies throughout the state with behavioral health peer-to-peer counseling. The first time the state has actually used federal dollars to actually contract directly with CBOs. It went so well that the state has decided to bring the program in-house now that the FEMA grant has ended. And so now there's an opportunity for the state under the CalHOPE program to do a new RFP and to select a whole bunch of CBOs throughout the state to deliver these services. I think that's the model. And so what we need to do is insist that Medi-Cal funding be eligible for CBOs that are providing both clinical and non-clinical behavioral health. We need to train the CBOs in how to access the Medi-Cal money because it's not easy, it's very complicated. And we need to increase the Medi-Cal reimbursement, not only for non-clinical and clinical behavioral health specialists, but also for medical providers generally. One of the big challenges as we have expanded Medi-Cal, and I've supported expanding it to single adults, I've supported expanding it to all undocumented people, is that the medical reimbursements, not just for behavioral health specialists, but for medical providers writ large, are too low. And so I did support the tobacco tax to try to raise that, but we haven't raised it enough, and as a consequence, we have these shortages. The other thing we can do, though, is through the regulators of health insurance and HMOs, require that they build out more robust private commercial plans, including Medi-Cal managed care plans that have sufficient behavioral health specialists. Right now, frankly, both DMHC and the Department of Insurance are letting them slide. And so we should have more rigorous enforcement so that they will hire more behavioral health specialists through the commercial plans, while we're also working to hire more, deploy more, and help CBOs be contracted with to deploy more behavioral health, both in the youth and adult context. My time is up.
Thank you, Pastor. But first of all, I don't think any of us can complain about being here on a Sunday. If you made it, you've probably been going since goodness knows what time this morning. So thank you all so much for being here and giving us an opportunity to answer some of these questions and just talk to you today. My name's Angelique Ashby. I'm really honored to be in the room. The first thing I would say to you is the best way that we can help Sacramento County do better with healthcare and social work and all of these issues tied to this question is to elect that woman in the front row that you just heard from. Jaclyn Moreno is one of my mentees and my friends. I'm really proud of her, really proud to support her. She's a game changer. And I often say this, don't get me wrong, Dave, our race is important, but that race is very, very, very important. So I hope you'll all spend some time on her and make sure she gets elected. I've been on the city council for 12 years. I sure would have liked to have her as a partner for even one of those. So Jaclyn, with you all the way. Aside from that, what can we do from the state senate? I'm married to a nurse. My husband is an emergency room trauma nurse at Sutter downtown. And so you can imagine the years he's had here for the last 3 or so in Sacramento, and the mental health toll and the need for social workers in the hospital, emergency rooms, not to mention the city of Sacramento, the county of Sacramento, and how we pay for it, which I think we all can agree, yes to increasing pay, yes to bringing the pay up, yes to providing more resources to counties and cities. In the city of Sacramento, we never had social workers working for us before, but recently we adopted a new program, the Department of Community Response, which I think is brilliant, very supportive. This is where we send social workers out to 911 calls that aren't life-threatening. So in other words, people who are experiencing homelessness or maybe a mental health break in somebody's home. We try to send social workers, the Jaclyns of the world, out to talk people down and see if we can keep law enforcement out of the equation. But in order to do that, we're putting more demand on a system that already doesn't have enough people working in it. So really part of the solution comes with infusing education too. In addition to providing resources to pay for the need, we also need to create more social workers, more healthcare workers into the stream in the city of Sacramento. I got my start in a junior college. I started at American River, and then I transferred to UC Davis. I was a single mom while I was there. The child care at American River is how I got my degree. It's how I got started. It's how I got introduced to child action, and ultimately how I, as a single mom, earned my law degree from McGeorge, moving through that system. We have to create a system in Sacramento where people not only understand that social work and healthcare are opportunities for them, but where they are high wage jobs where people can afford to live and raise their families in Sacramento. So yeah, all for it, and definitely raising the wages is part of the issue, Pastor.
Thank you very much. The second question I'm going to ask candidate Ashby that you respond first. It is under the heading of housing and homelessness. Our current system leads to very different access to supportive services for different people in crisis, and it's based somewhat on arbitrary factors. Are you in favor of growing social supports like permanent supportive housing for people who don't meet the legal definition for incompetence, but who are unable to properly care for themselves? Part B question of the same question is, how would you remove barriers and increase resources? And then a part C, from where would the resources come?
Yes. Yes is the answer, of course. It is not a kindness to leave someone in their addiction or in their trauma. That is not a kindness. And so I am all for creating more inventory. In fact, I hope if you're all not busy on Thursday, please come out and join me. We're going to open the city's newest shelter out in North Natomas. It is a converted project, Home Key project, which means that we took several $1 million from the state, bought a hotel in my district and converted it for hundreds of people who are experiencing homelessness. Caveat, we made it for people with children. So all of these folks are people who have young children who are currently living unhoused. And then we filled it with wraparound services, which links us back to the first question, Pastor, because housing is definitely an issue, but housing alone will not solve our homeless problem because we need those mental health services. We need those drug addiction and trauma-informed services. We have a lot of domestic violence victims on our streets. On my time on the council, I've been really known for fighting for women and children. I've advocated for millions of dollars to be spent on programs like St. John's and City of Refuge and My Sister's House and Weave. And those programs, to me, have been left behind. Sometimes, like you said in your question, unintentionally, things happen and women and children get moved to the bottom of the stack. I think we need to be really careful and intentional about this. At the state level, what your next state senator can do is tie funding to the outcomes between the city and the county. I wish I had a Jaclyn, but I didn't. There is no Supervisor Moreno there yet. And so there is a lot of friction between the city and the county. And there still needs to be some impetus from the state that says these dollars will come to you, city, and these dollars will come to you, county, when you collaborate and work together. City, you need to build the housing. County, you need to provide the mental health services. We're tired of seeing you fight with each other. Now your funding is tied to your outcomes. That needs to happen. It's just grown-ups in the room, and it's long overdue. Should have happened a long time ago. And then I would say too, on this issue of how do we pay for it, one of the reasons that we're in the predicament we're in for housing is because legislatures before us got rid of what we call redevelopment. So we lost all hundreds of millions of dollars that we used to get that the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency used to build things like Hotel Berry and Mercy Housing and to pay for the women's centers that are out at the new Air Force bases. We really need some form of redevelopment back. It used to go to businesses too. It doesn't need to do that. It just needs to go to housing. And it really needs to go to housing that's transit focused, that's focused on how people get to and from services, how people get to and from childcare and work, and that we're focused on serving the families in Sacramento. Really, the issue with homelessness comes down to making sure that we have wraparound service-rich environments when we build that housing. That's the key to success.
Thank you. Candidate Jones, same question.
So the homeless crisis in Sacramento County is now worse than San Francisco. It has grown and grown and grown, and there has been a failure on the part of the cities and counties to build enough shelter, build enough permanent supportive housing, and build or approve enough affordable housing. And that's simply the bottom line. On shelter, we need to dramatically expand the number of shelter units. We need to include treatment services for mental illness and substance use disorder and other wraparound services as well. When I was on the city council in about 2003 or so, I took it upon myself to build the first major shelter outside the downtown. It has evolved into a 200-bed shelter that's been providing 200 beds a night. Sadly, others didn't follow that lead, and as a consequence, we have a huge shortfall, not only in the city, but in the county as well. When I was on the city council, partnering with Area Congregations Together and Howard Lawrence and other leaders, I authored the Inclusionary Affordable Housing Ordinance, which required 15% of all new development to be affordable. That's why there are 11 affordable housing developments in Natomas today. They wouldn't have been built but for the ordinance. But sadly, a later council, including my opponent, voted to eliminate that requirement. And it wasn't because there was a lawsuit against the ordinance. There was no lawsuit filed. It was something the development community wanted. They didn't want to have to continue to provide affordable housing. Instead, a very, very low fee was substituted, and we've fallen way, way behind. I think the state of California, and what I will do as state senator is work on this, ought to insist that cities and counties build and approve enough affordable housing to meet the needs of their community, and enough shelters and enough permanent supportive housing. On permanent supportive housing, I think it's fantastic that Jamboree is opening up a converted motel in Natomas, but that's not a shelter, and that's one. We need probably 30 or 40 times that in order to meet the need. So I have very, very strong views on this. We've got to do a lot more. We see the crisis on our streets every day, and it's just not sustainable.
Thank you. The final question in this category, it deals with climate. I'm going to ask Angelique if you would take this one first, and then follow with candidate Jones. How do we increase affordable housing stock while still being proactive on reducing greenhouse gases through establishing enforceable legislation at the state level? Part B is, how can the state legislature ensure city and county governments will be held accountable?
Yeah,
First.
great question. Two sometimes competing goals and sometimes complementary goals. I've had the privilege of representing the new growth area of the city of Sacramento for the last 12 years. And my opponent and I argue often about inclusionary housing and why it's there or not there, or which model is better. The truth is that we both support it. We have different versions of how to get there. And you can argue with Lachelle Dozier, the head of SHRA, about whether or not your original language was invalidated. It's not my argument to carry. But what I will say is that the pathway forward really has to do with cities and how they're planned. So I've served on the SACOG board for a long time. And when you work on SACOG, you look at the region's housing goals and the region's transportation goals, and everybody gets allotted a share. So in Elk Grove, they have to build a certain amount of housing. In Folsom, they have to build a certain amount of housing. And it's across the spectrum. So it's not just any housing, it's housing everywhere on the spectrum to housing everywhere on the spectrum. So when you build middle-income housing, it also helps low-income housing. When you build low-income housing, it also helps middle-income housing because people move. They don't stay stagnant. For example, I lived in low-income inclusionary housing in this county, in this city, when I was a young single mom. But later, when I was married and my husband and I had better jobs, we were able to afford move-up housing, which was Natomas. Natomas is a very high-density master planned community put together by probably one of my supporters, Mayor Heather Fargo, who did a really good job of planning out how parks and schools and the environment would interplay. So one of the things that we boast is the strongest environmental plan in the Natomas Basin Conservancy. It's saved many species, it protects farmland, it has a lot of joint uses. So the point is, when you plan, you have to plan carefully. And these mandates do come from the state, and they come down through the Regional Council of Governances to areas like SACOG, and then you plan for the housing in tandem with transportation. So for example, we really need light rail to get all the way to the airport, and we have built housing in anticipation of that along that line to the airport. And we're building a hospital along that line. And so when we look at building that hospital, we made sure that we moved the future transit line to connect so that a major healthcare hub would be right on that line for people who are living in housing in this community. Housing isn't just about the housing. It isn't. It's about access to jobs. It's about how close you are to your schools. For moms like me, it was also about whether or not I could get my kiddo to childcare. I literally had to take that into consideration when choosing which location to live in. I think having a senator with the experience that I have, the lived experience that I have, having used food stamps, having lived in low-income housing, benefiting from colleges just like this one, and working my way through all of that to law school and ultimately becoming the vice mayor of our city will make a big difference in the state legislature. And I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Jones?
Climate change is literally killing us, whether it's wildfires, drought, floods, or urban heat islands. We simply need to do more faster to address it. I'm an internationally recognized leader with regard to dealing with climate risk, the first financial regulator in the globe to actually ask an entire financial industry to divest from the dirtiest of fossil fuels, coal. I asked the insurance industry to get out. When I was insurance commissioner, that resulted in about $4 billion in divestment. Affordable housing is not in conflict with dealing with the climate crisis. In fact, to the contrary, most affordable housing is done at higher densities. It's done near transit. It's done near parks. It's done near jobs. It's done in ways that allow people to bicycle and walk to where they work. And so, in fact, affordable housing contributes to addressing climate change because it reduces the overall footprint of development, provides housing at sufficient densities to support public transportation like light rail, and at the same time helps to build community. And it can be built and has been built and designed in a way that's energy efficient, that conserves energy and meets all of our climate objectives. So I don't see an inconsistency. However, we're not approving or building enough affordable housing. And so we need the state to lean in and insist that cities and counties approve more and build more affordable housing, full stop. Without that, we're going to continue to muddle along as we have been with an incredible shortage, the results of which are there for eyes to see, which is a tremendous increase in the homeless population. Now, not all of that homelessness is a function of lack of affordable housing. There are other ingredients as well: mental illness, substance use disorder, COVID. But a significant portion is driven by a lack of affordable housing. And the state needs to insist that it be built and be approved. And if it's not, the state needs to align incentives accordingly. And that means making sure that state funding streams are aligned with whether or not cities approve and build affordable housing. That means reducing the regulatory barriers that are there, that are oftentimes imposed and used in an arbitrary and unilateral way to block affordable housing. That means even going as far as allowing as of right development of affordable housing where a community is not meeting its fair share obligation to build affordable housing. We simply have got to do more faster to meet the needs of our community. And it needs to be done in an equitable way through a equity and justice lens. So we're meeting the needs of the diverse communities, the diverse geographies that make up this Senate district. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
Thank you both. Can we give an applause for this? Thank you so very, very much. As we mentioned at the beginning, there will, you may
Thank
go
you
ahead.
Thanks very much.
Yes, you are. Thank you. As we noted at the beginning, all of the questions that we have been able to raise today, that came from you. And I just want to emphasize that these kinds of forums are vitally important. We are all living in a democracy. And this is an experiment of a democracy. So it's not perfected yet. Hello, somebody, say amen. But the one piece that I would like to emphasize is that we all have to play our part. And our part sometimes is running for office. That's grand and bold. But then that doesn't let all the rest of us off of the hook. We are also responsible for casting our votes, encouraging others to cast our votes, to participate in these kinds of forums, submitting your questions ahead of time. That's all part of the process. And I want to thank you, those in the audience. I do know there's just about as many online. I want to thank you. Let me give a high five to those online. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your time and attention today. Yes, because this matters. This really does matter. It is an experiment that we might lose if we're not involved. And I especially thank the Sacramento Area Congregations Together. Everybody who's here from Sacramento Area Congregations Together, would you just stand and be? Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. And also the National Council of Jewish Women, would you stand? These are these are fighters that continue year after year after year after year to bring to our attention how important and how vital our vote is, and for us not to lose hold of the fact that we are in a democracy. As much as it might not work, it is still the best thing going. It is. And as we stay engaged, keeping our shoulder to the wheel, it will get better. I'm a prophet of hope. I know it's going to get better. And I want to thank you today because you did a wonderful job of helping me to be a circle keeper. I started off saying that's what I do, and that's what I love doing, is holding safe and sacred gatherings. Because in those safe and sacred gatherings, we can do some meaningful kinds of work. I hope all of you found this to be meaningful today. Even if you didn't go to my church, that's all right. We had a meaningful gathering together. And I pray that you will take all of this information into the voting booth with you. So share it with those around you, your neighbors who have gotten sort of complacent about participating at all. Come on. Light a fire in your neighborhood, light a fire at your job, light a fire at your school. So no, there's some good people. Any one of these candidates, those who had to leave, they would serve well in the office for which they are bidding. Come on. If we're not careful, we will have no one competing. And you know what else will dissolve a democracy? Is that we have no competition. They're like, I'm uncontested, I'm just gonna run. It's gotta be some competition, there's gotta be some differences in approaches. So with that, oh, somebody has a hand? Go ahead.
Shout out to our colleagues and friends here from the Jewish Community Relations Council, also a co-sponsor.
Okay, can you stand? Yes. Don't want to overlook anybody. Great, thank you so much for doing that. With that, I'm feeling like we're closing now. SACAC, do I have anything else I need to do? I'm glad that you are, and honored that you guys asked me to to come in and to moderate on today. And it's great to see everybody. It's great to be back in your presence because we've been locked down for a while and haven't seen some of you in a long time. And so I'm glad to see you all. Let's continue the great work of moving forward.
Shout out from the podium.
You're here. Yeah.